Welcome to the Girl Dad Show.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Girl Dad Show. I'm super excited to have Steve Bennet on the show today. Steve, thank you so much for joining me. I know you're a busy man.
Thanks, Young. Excited to be here. Always, always loved talking about my work and my two daughters.
Let's do it. Oh, a true girl dad. I love it. That's great.
Yeah,
Let's jump right into it, though. Why don't you tell the listeners what you do for a living?
Sure. For the last, God, I'm probably a bit older than some of the other guests on the show. For the last 3 decades plus, I've been splitting my time between teaching entrepreneurship at universities, investing in startups and venture firms. I've built a couple of accelerators, been partner at venture firms, and then taking operating roles in startups. So I've been CFO of over 30 companies during that period in a bunch of different sectors around tech. Loved working with entrepreneurs. And now at this point in my career, I'm beginning to kind of do more giving back. So I'm board chair of a nonprofit called Scholar Match, where we offer mentorship and scholarships to first generation low income students. So really a critical need these days.
That's amazing. And how did you, if you don't mind sharing and double clicking into your journey, like where did this all start? I'm assuming you got your feet wet in working, and then you eventually became into teaching, or were you always teaching?
No, although I started teaching pretty early in my career. So I currently live in Palo Alto, California, where I've raised my daughters here, but grew up on the East Coast outside of Washington, D.C., went to college in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania, decided I wanted to change of scenery and came out to California for a couple of years to do MBA at UCLA. Ended up meeting my wife in the program. So I kind of joked that I actually went to grad school for my MR degree. And
nice.
And my wife is from the Bay Area, so moved up here, and I've been here ever since. So my early career was in finance and accounting, have a CPA, primarily early on in the real estate industry. Then I made a shift to tech. And the funny thing about teaching was I ended up with a job, again, when I kind of moved into tech, it was with a real estate consulting firm. They had a software product, and they said, "Hey, Steve, can you manage the software product?" And I said, "Sure, that seems a little more interesting than real estate. I'm here in Silicon Valley. Let's give it a shot." And I realized pretty quickly I knew nothing about software product marketing. And I went and looked, and I found a class at UC Berkeley Extension. Said, let's take this. They had a bunch of speakers come in, and I got to know the professor, and we got to talking. And she was putting together this whole business of software program. And she asked me, "What other kind of classes should we have in here?" And I said, "Well, you need one on financing and venture capital." And she said, "That's a great idea. Can you teach it?" So that was my foray into teaching at UC Berkeley at the adult ed. And fortunately, they signed me up to teach 2 semesters up front, because I think if I had an out after the first semester, I probably would have taken it. The amount of time that I put in to teach that first class, probably worked out to about $1.37 an hour. And then beyond that, now I taught at Berkeley for 8 years. I've been at San Jose State, your alma mater, for the last 20 years now, and I've created about 6 or 7 classes, and I love it. I love teaching students. It's interesting. When I started teaching, the students, since it was adult ed, were my age or older. Then they were kind of older than my kids' age. Then they were my kids' age, and now my students are much younger than my kids. So it's been kind of this full journey.
Yeah, you've gone through so much time and cycles. It's amazing. That's awesome. And I will say that in one little small facet, there was a time where I was at San Jose State doing a lot more like lecturing and participation through guest lecturing. There was a good 1.5 to 2 years where I got called a lot by different professors in business there. And it was the most gratifying experience ever. It was so like stimulating and gratifying and energizing and inspiring. And I could see how, even though it nets out to a very low dollar per hour rate, how fulfilling it is.
Yeah, no, I donate what I make back to the university, because it's so little relative to everything else that I do that I prefer to do that and just consider it volunteer work. But the class, and again, as I said, I've taught a number of classes. The class that I originally started teaching at Berkeley was entrepreneurial finance, and I taught that when I got to San Jose State, but now I've focused more on experiential learning. So I've taught a class on founders and funders, but the one that I've really enjoyed that I'm teaching this semester, where you're going to come and give a guest lecture in a few weeks, is the Entrepreneurship Lab, or E-Lab, where the students all do an internship in a startup or venture capital firm during the semester. then they share the experiences in the classroom. So I now have, they wanted to offer it to more students. Students have to apply. There's a competitive selection process, but it used to be 12 to 15 students, which was more manageable. Last year, they made me increase it to 25 students. So I have to find internships for 25 students. And,
Oh,
the
wow.
job market changes every year. It's very dynamic. And this year it's been a little more challenging. So I just got my 25th student placed this week. So we're all good and moving ahead. And it's a great network. I've had, San Jose State's a huge university with 35,000 students. And then you look for smaller communities and networks. So I've now had 280, I think, that have taken the entrepreneurship lab, and we have a reception every year. We bring students back. There's a flywheel. Prior students are hiring current students in their companies. So
Cool.
it's really gratifying just to kind of help these students launch their careers, then follow their journeys. Once, it's kind of like your kids, right? That's what we're kind of talking about here. Yeah. How
Yeah.
do you manage, working, traveling, parenting? I don't even know how old your kids are young. I'm sure they're a lot younger than mine are.
Yeah, mine are 6 and 8. I unfortunately started really late, so I have young kids,
Okay.
but
Yeah, mine are 32 and 29, and
nice.
I have my first grandchild. So this is now girl dad, but
Oh, congratulations.
I've got a boy grandson who's almost 2 years old, and then my daughter's pregnant, so they're going to have another grandchild and come late June. And don't know the gender; she won't tell us, but
Yeah.
very
I've heard through
excited
the
either way.
grapevine that being a grandpa is better than being a dad. That's what I've heard. Any
It's
truth to
kind of
that?
funny. I have somebody bought this mug for my wife, and it says 49% grandma, 51% badass,
That's awesome.
and she doesn't like it, so I drink my coffee out of it. So I got to find a grandpa one, but I think the grandma's better,
Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
great. It's a great saying. I love it.
but
That's
it
awesome.
kind of, being a parent, and I'm sure you've seen this with your wife. It's the kids kind of pull different strings with mom and dad, and figure out how to get what they want, and different discipline and everything else. But it's there. There's books out there, but there's no real training manuals. It's one
No.
thing you definitely learn on the job.
No, yeah, it's definitely on the job training for sure. I do want to know what your adult kids think about what you do for a living. Do they understand like what you do, and where do they end up?
Not really. I remember when they were little, one of my kids, when she asked what her parents do, you say, yeah, mom plays with Terry and dad.coms. So this is
And
going back
dad.coms? That's funny. Okay,
dad.com.
okay.
I think this was, so my wife job shared with a good friend, so that was Terry. Yeah, I think they knew a little bit, because at one time I was working with a company where you could, um, do custom dolls. So I think that they thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I don't really know. It's interesting. So again, Palo Alto, kind of the middle of Silicon Valley. Early on, when I got, and you may remember this, when I got to San Jose State, we had this event called the Neat Ideas Fair. So it's basically like a science fair for entrepreneurship. You have poster boards, you have elevator pitches, and
Yeah.
it's now called the Innovation Challenge. But my younger daughter, when she was in fifth grade, they did like this entrepreneurship program where they did friendship bracelets and had to figure out how to bring them to market. And I thought it'd be really cool if they had a field trip coming down to San Jose State. So fifth grade, they did a field trip, came down, and you had 30 fifth graders walking around among all the university students, judges, alumni, and everything. And they were asking really good questions about the projects, and I'm sure very different ones than a lot of the others were asking. So I think and neither one of them, went anywhere close to my field or my wife's field. My older daughter got a graduate degree in public policy and works for the state of California in homeless policy. She works for the state of California. My younger daughter's a pediatric occupational therapist, so works in the schools. So I say that, and my wife is executive director of a foundation. So I say the three of them are doing good, and then I'm the greedy capitalist.
Mm-hmm. Or you're the
So
diversified,
yeah,
Hail
but I'm
Mary. Yeah.
I'm trying to spend more time doing good. I'm now board chair, as I mentioned, with
Yeah.
Dollar Match, which is a great nonprofit. We have actually an event tonight and a board retreat tomorrow. So that's kind of top of mind. But the funding environment for nonprofits is pretty challenging right now in the current political environment.
Yeah.
Kind of spending time there. And then I do a lot of other activities on campus while still, kind of helping out my companies and being on for-profit boards as long as nonprofit boards. And still have one company, the public software company that I'm CFO of. So doing a bit of that, but trying to, over the next few years, phase down a little bit. Actually, one of the things, this is something else. So when I was in, I advised the kids, go off and do a study abroad, get these experiences. So my
Mm-hmm.
older daughter went off and studied in Cape Town, South Africa, had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
My younger daughter was a NCAA athlete, so it was harder for her to kind of take off for a semester. So she didn't. She was supposed to do it in grad school, then COVID came and that got canceled. But I'm actually thinking about doing a semester abroad now and going to teach somewhere since I never did it when I was in college. So I'm beginning to explore sometime in the next couple of years going and finding a university. And I've talked to a few. I've only just put out some feelers. But if there's anybody out there listening to this looking for somebody to teach a class on venture capital, founders, entrepreneurship somewhere around the world, as long as it can be taught in English, hit me up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a blast. I've taught programs coming to Silicon Valley from other parts of the world, but I'd love to kind of go there and do that myself.
It's awesome. So just to go back to the question though, like I know what your kids thought about, you .comming as a verb when they were younger, but they do get it now, right? Like they get that you were making bets, your investor, your angel investor.
Yeah. They
CFO.
understand what kind of what an angel investor is. Obviously teaching, I think I've had them both come and sit in on classes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they got that when they were younger. I don't remember if it was middle school or high school, but I mentioned my younger daughter came to the program when, that fifth grade field trip. So
Yeah.
I think one of the things, and again, this isn't something about it relates to what I do because I always wanted a very flexible career. So, at one point I think I called in, somebody told me, you have a portfolio career. And I said, okay, that's kind of doing a bunch of different things and building this portfolio.
Right.
I like that. It never worked great for me having a full-time, job where you went to the same place every day. I did that when I was younger, haven't done it in over 30 years. And that didn't work out well for me just because I, craved something different. And also I never really fit well having a boss. I don't suffer fools, and I tend to be pretty candid and feedback to everybody I work with, and sometimes people that you work for don't appreciate that. So it kind of translated into having this flexible career, working from home a good bit before. I actually had my own office in downtown Palo Alto, but still I could come and go, very flexible. The kids saw me around. I could be the dad on field trips. Which was great. I'd often be chaperoning a field trip, and they're in
It's awesome.
first or second or third grade with 8 moms and me, and
so random. I love it. That's great.
Yeah. I remember one time going and the monarch butterflies, in down in Santa Cruz. So you always go down there, and then they kind of had to have somebody kind of live action acting the butterfly part. So I had to wear these butterfly wings and kind of,
awesome.
fly around. And I think my daughter still kind of laughs about that. I think
it sounds like you really lived a very Silicon Valley life where you got to be a little bit flexible and try something different than the average norm, which is great.
And I think that's a lot of what, this is all about. And I think you see it a lot more now in the last 5+ years where there is more flexibility in terms of regular jobs, and, people are out and about and can do this. But certainly when I had kids, there was no such thing as paternity leave. Now it's pretty standard. So it was a little bit unusual that, you could have a, kind of, dad there in the classroom. So I volunteer in the classroom sometimes. So I really, like to do that. My wife would, do it too. She worked at Intel for a long time for kind of the bulk of the early part of her career. So, didn't have quite as much flexibility, but she worked it out. So she wasn't quite working full time. She'd be 80%. So she'd have a day off. She could do all that stuff on her day off.
Sounds like a blessed life. Yeah, it sounds great, really great. But I know that there's harder parts to it because you've been inside of startups and you've been inside of Silicon Valley and you've been part of these startups and companies as an advisor, investor, and as a CFO. What's some of the hardest things you've gone through as a business?
It and being CFO, I mean, you're kind of responsible for the business model,
Yep.
coaching, working with, the CEO and the board, and oftentimes you have different constituencies. So I think that's one thing. If the board is losing faith in the CEO, but you're working for the CEO, kind of how do you balance that? And then there's just the day-to-day cash. I've been, as a entrepreneurial way of managing, you're often, the definition that I love about entrepreneurship is, you're seeking opportunity without regard to the resources that you currently control. So it's
Yeah.
in a way of managing, you have to figure out how you're going to make payroll and have enough cash for next month. So I've been in many situations where, you're pulling something out of a hat last minute to make payroll, figuring out how you're going to get that bridge loan. I've been in others. I had one company years ago where we were a startup here in the US, but we were owned by a German company, and they would
Hmm.
fund us every month. And then one day they just decided, we're done, but they did it without telling us. The wire's coming tomorrow. The wire's coming tomorrow. And ultimately, they put us into a shell. We were on our own and totally screwed. So, we had to lay everybody off, figure out what we were going to do. And,
Oh, that's
that was,
rough.
that was a really ugly situation. But I've been with others. I've been on the venture capital side. I've been on the company side. When I've spent more time on the investor side, I found that getting a little bit boring. So
Hmm.
early in my career, I wanted to make sure that I was keeping those operating chops and skills alive. Had a company where we raised around from a top tier VC name partner, and there were a couple companies that came out at the time, but we had a credit card solution where you could have all your credit cards on that device. So you could just kind of cycle through them, carry one card, had security built in, and then right as we were going to market was something else came out where you could do all that on your
Yeah.
on your phone. So
Yeah.
that in large part that basically killed our business. So we sat down with the VCs, figured out a pivot. We had enough capital to kind of go and build this and do all the work to launch a kind of a budgeting app with a card, and we've seen other things like this.
Yeah.
And then we lined up financing, and then we had a meeting with kind of the name partner of this firm and our partner that we were working with that we've been spending 6 months going through this pivot. And the partner comes in and basically says, doesn't really ask any questions, sits in for 5 minutes, leaves, and then the next day we find out we're not going to do it. So all
Oh,
the other
geez.
financing that we had lined up
Yeah.
walked away. We had spent 6 months doing this, and it was basically, okay, sell the assets, you're done. That's kind of the rough side, but luckily I've had, many more successful outcomes. But if
Yeah.
you're going to be in this business and you're going to make all these bets, more companies will fail than succeed. So you have to have the risk profile to stomach that. And I think that probably speaks a little bit just how do I, kind of go through life on more of an even keel, knowing that
Yeah.
anybody can come by and knock you off one day. Somebody else can knock you off, but
That's
you
right.
kind of keep going, and you try
Yeah.
and teach your kids resiliency too, and
Yeah.
all the things that they need to do. With entrepreneurs, it's I don't want to making big huge mistakes, but they
Yeah.
make little mistakes or sometimes bigger mistakes. Don't make the same mistake twice, but that's the only way you learn, right?
Totally.
Same thing with your kids. If you do everything for your kids, they're going to end up not being self-sufficient. So
And more often than not, fortune does reward the bold. And so
yeah.
you can't expect startups to scale if they don't take some sort of risk, and so
Oh
you have
no,
to
no, no! You
encourage that.
have to. There's a theory. Because sometimes you hear investors bragging about how all their companies are alive or something. Well, that's not the goal here. I mean, I guess the difference too is if you're, and I explain this to entrepreneurs who are raising venture capital, that you may not
Hmm.
want to raise venture capital. Think about it, because um, you know the venture capitalist customer are their investors, the limited partners. I'm
Yep.
an LP in a bunch of funds, so I know that. And the entrepreneur basically has one bet here. The VC has 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 bets. They want you to succeed, but they don't need you to succeed. They
Yeah.
need they need a few companies in their portfolio, the power law, to have a huge return, but everything else is
Is a bet.
it doesn't matter. So,
Yeah.
again, depending on the firm, they'll work with you, but at the end of the day, and kind of like this example I gave you, the name partner probably decided, well, yeah, we don't need to spend any more time here. Let's
Yeah.
just move on. And then meanwhile, all the people working in our company and the executives in the company have been working on this pivot and getting the partners in place. It's a
Yeah.
different story for them. So,
Right.
if you can build a company without outside capital, or at least, and I know you do this, and it's a very different way of doing it, but it often works out much better for the entrepreneur than
Yeah.
than the more.
I've definitely pivoted quite hard. I mean, I had a midlife crisis pretty bad 5 years ago when I turned 40, and I've been building businesses with no fundraising, just
Yeah.
bootstrapping everything, because I've had 3 exits and I still have to work. And so you learn very quickly that, how exits work and dilution matters and how safe
Yeah,
bets,
no, I had
calculate.
early on when I started doing this was probably in the mid 90s, before everything kind of took off. I had two companies I was involved in. Within like a month, they both got bought for $15 million, which now
Nice.
seems like, kind of mouse nuts. But one of them had raised under a million. The other one had raised 15 million. So the one that
Nice.
raised 15 million is like the poker table at the end of the night, where you're just kind of giving back everybody's chips and everybody goes home, and
Yeah.
some win a little, some lose a little, but there everybody just kind of gets their money back. There's nothing left for the founders. The other one worked out great for the founder, and for the few early investors, made a
Yep.
nice return. Not huge, but
Yeah, it was something. Yeah.
you're in control. And that's why in the founders class I teach, one of the key questions, founder dilemmas, is, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? If you want to be rich, yeah, I mean, you can go with that venture route, or you can kind of still go on your own. But control is more important. You're making different decisions. So those are some of the things that
Yeah, I mean, I still believe in fundraising, and I still
yeah,
believe that venture plays a role, and I help a lot of our clients help fundraise. I mean, I'm fundraising constantly for my clients, and I just think that it's one of those things where you have to really understand, like back to what you said earlier, the incentives for the LPs is different than the venture fund
yep.
and the managing partner. They're the GP there. The incentives are different for the founder, and you have to understand how that whole ecosystem works, and then how you fit in that and what you're trying to get out of this business. Because
I like investing very early. And if you're
yeah,
investing, kind of first check in, you're much closer to the entrepreneur,
yeah,
because
that's funny. That's
the
funny.
incentives are similar. You're almost like an extended member of the team.
Yeah,
But once you get to the later stages, or even not even the later stages these days, even late
yeah,
Series A, and then every time new money comes in, right, you're resetting the clock.
yeah.
So there, because that new money needs their return. It's not the same multiple as the earliest
That's right.
investor, but
Valuations go up. Yep.
you're still, from where they're coming in, they're just even now. Then it goes down a little bit, and you got to build back up.
I know.
So
That's funny.
that's something else to recognize. I've seen that where somebody has an
Yeah.
opportunity to sell early. They don't. They take the money and they go another 8 years, and they make less than they would have if they had just taken
Yeah.
the early
Exactly.
on.
Exactly.
So
That happens a lot. Yeah.
it does, and yeah, you don't want to be too greedy. Again, it
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah.
If you have a company that's going to be capital intensive or require a ton of dollars for marketing,
Yeah.
and I like having a dual path where you can go either way. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd love to just like on the topic of fundraising and venture and business, I'd love to ask you, because you alluded to it. It sounds like you've been inside the space as an operator. You've been a CFO, you've been an investor, you've been an LP, and you're also a professor in this vertical and function, which is also really great. But curious to know what your success looks like in business in this next chapter of your life. What do you think is success for you in this next chapter?
yeah, I mean, I think it's really giving back. I have a lot of
Mm,
friends who have retired at this point. I
hmm.
don't plan on ever fully retiring, and
Good for
that's
you.
something else too. And I'll take, just to kind of take an aside here. So uh, my dad was a tax attorney. He worked for the
Oh,
IRS
wow.
on very esoteric, tax issues and private letter rulings, and worked with, kind of, uh, you know, trained a bunch of commissioners, IRS commissioners coming in over the years. And then he got to, be 65, and he could either retire or keep working. There was no option to work less, because if he worked part-time, he'd make less money than if he worked not at all because of the pension. So, at 65 or 66, he retired. My mom, I remember being freaked out that, what's he going to do? He's going to be around the house all the time. He's going
Right.
to, upset the apple cart. He's going to keep asking me for things. And then he had a second career as an artist. So he went
Nice.
20 years as an artist.
That's
That's
great.
very kind of left brain, right brain, and displayed at galleries and kind of shifted from watercolors to abstracts. And at the same time, my mom's, got back and started doing art. So she did
It's
more
awesome.
landscapes. And, so they actually had some joint exhibits on, it's called The Marriage of Contrasts was one, because,
It's cool. Is that where you're leaning towards, or are you just telling me the story to show? Oh, because you don't know. Got it. Okay.
I think that probably skips at least a generation. So
Yeah.
no, I'm looking again. That's what part of the reason why I've got involved in nonprofits. I want to continue, you know, coaching entrepreneurs, teaching as long as the students will have me. I mean, my cultural references are getting pretty dated. I like showing, clips if I'm doing lectures. And I remember one time we were talking about founder breakups, and there's
Yeah.
a Seinfeld episode with George and Susan about a prenup, and it's pretty funny. And then, the students kind of look at me and say, "Ah, yeah, my grandparents talk about that show."
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm
Exactly.
getting so old.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so that's
Still figuring it out. Yeah. You're gonna keep doing
still
it till you figure it
figuring
out.
it
I love it.
out. I do, I've got other stuff.
That's awesome.
I
Yeah.
run the I run the senior group at my golf club,
That's
and
awesome. That's a good one. Yeah.
tennis, and so I'm just kind of doing a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, the nonprofits, and as I mentioned, I'm board chair with Scholar Match, so that takes up some time. I'm involved
Yeah.
in programs at
That's
the
great.
university, and
Yeah,
so
let me switch gears. So then, if you're still figuring that one out, I'd love to just talk to you about another gear. So, as you have adult children and now you're starting to have grandkids, what does success look like you for as a dad and as a grandpa? What are you looking for in this next stage of your dad
well,
life?
being a grandparent's a blast.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Every day, my and my daughter with my grandson, they live in Sacramento, so they're a couple hours away. So we don't see them nearly as much as we want to, but we
Yeah,
can
it's
get
still
there.
close.
We
Yeah,
get there in a couple hours, and yeah, so we'll see them, once a month or so or more if we can. But yeah, I mean, every day his vocabulary's going up. Now he loves calling us, FaceTiming. So I love being called Pop Pop. That's kind of that's my role now. So looking forward to when I can get him swinging a golf club or a tennis racket,
nice.
all that. And with my kids, it's kind of watching them grow and
Yeah,
kind of go through all the phases that we have, and the world's very different now. So there's some things that definitely are, they're dealing with different stuff than we did, and kind of what this country's going to look like, what the planet's going to look like. So
yeah,
there's some seriousness there, but I think our philosophy as parents has always been to not be hands off, but not be micromanaging them. So
mm,
when they were, yeah, my younger daughter was the athlete I mentioned. She ran in college, and did a bunch of different sports. So we would go to the games and be team parents, and loved doing that. Our last race in college, we went to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, in the end of November, where it was about 17
mm.
degrees and freezing while they're running this NCAA championship cross country race. And we figured probably her last race. Now she runs adult stuff. We've barely been to any of
Yeah.
any of that.
Just
We're
being there
here,
for them and
go
mentoring
on,
them through the life stages.
we love going on family trips and
That's
having
great.
them around. And family's really important to us. So seeing that grow with another generation, and kind of seeing
It's awesome.
hopefully have many grandkids and see them develop.
Yeah,
I think that's all you can want as a parent, is to see your kids happy.
yeah,
That's what it's about. And if we can give them more to kind of get started, fortunately we're in a place where we can help them out. I think, a lot of people, see the kids kind of struggle financially a bit, and then, once you die, they inherit a bunch. So our philosophy is more, they need it now. So, let's help them out now. And so we're doing that. My, 5 years ago, we moved to Citrix. Citrix is a my older daughter was able to buy a house when she was in her 20s in California, so that's not an easy thing to do, and
Right.
they did
Yeah.
that primarily on their own. So
Those are
that was,
great success criteria. I love it. So that's like what you're looking for in this next chapter. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I think that's really what it's about, and trying to kind of
Yeah.
balance different things. And my challenge is, I suck at trying to retire, and probably really suck at retiring totally. So I kind of already figured out in how I go that I have a hard
Yeah.
time saying
I
no,
don't
and
think I'll ever retire. I think
but I have to.
it's a
Yeah,
lost cause. It's not worth it. Yeah.
my mom is almost 92, and she's still running around and playing tennis and
I love that. That's awesome.
active, and so
Yeah.
I figured I could be around for a while. And all four of my
Yeah.
grandparents lived into their 90s.
Yeah, I think having something to do is key, and I think especially for someone like you that's been has this bug of building and creating and
Yeah,
being able to deal with high pressure environments. I don't know if you could retire without having some stimulation. Yeah,
yeah, and I
so
think it just kind of helps the keep have the brain stay active.
that's
And
right. That's right.
so
Well, Steve, let me switch gears a little bit and ask you my rapid fire questions I like to ask all my guests on the show.
okay.
So, one piece of advice you have for other parents or soon to be parents, given your experience being a dad and a grandpa?
I think I just kind of talked a little bit about this, but I think let your kids make some mistakes.
Right.
Don't
Yeah.
We never, again, technology was different, but we've never tracked them on their phones. They didn't have smartphones when they were, in high school, probably not till the end of high school or college. But even so, I don't need to know where they are, every minute. So, when we were kids, right, it was very different, and we didn't have any of that communication. So parents would just say, please come home at some point.
Yeah.
So we weren't quite that hands off. We kind of want to know when they're coming and going, but
Yeah.
let them figure it out. Don't sign them up for a bunch of activities that you think they should do. Find out what interests them, what they want to do, and if they're involved in something and it's not doing it for them, so fine, go try something else. I think that's probably kind of one bit of advice, but
That's great.
obviously.
Yeah.
um,
I love it. Switching gears again, do you have a favorite book or podcast or show that you reference back to a lot that you would recommend to listeners?
well, from the kind of work side, I kind of what I teach. Venture Deals is a great book. Founder Dilemmas. Those are kind of two that I use
Cool, cool.
in my class. I do listen to a number of podcasts. I like storytelling. So
Hmm.
The Moth, This American Life are both podcasts that I listen to regularly. But I have
Yeah.
others. View from the Lane, the Tottenham Hotspurs podcast. That club's been just having a awful season. But I still listen to the podcast every week because I want to see how the commentators are surviving and make sure that nobody's too depressed. But
That's awesome. Yeah, those are great books. I've never heard of the first one. It's just called Venture Deals.
Venture Deals,
Yeah,
Brad Field. It's basically how to be smarter than your lawyer and venture capitalist.
I
So
love that. I gotta check that out.
my students, because you can't just leave it to the CFO, right? We
Hmm.
know that side to understand cap tables and how
Oh yeah.
valuation and terms work. And yeah, it's there's been a number. I don't know what the current edition is, but I think I have. You can't really see behind me. I think I have a few of those books sitting behind me
Awesome.
under my
Yeah, I'll check
shrine,
it out.
my hole in one, which you can kind of see in the back, which I wasn't sure if I would get a second one, and I haven't. So, I've got this big, frame shadow box with a scorecard, the ball, the flag,
Good for you.
all.
That's awesome.
And then I got it all done and shut up my house. And my wife said, "Yeah, that's not going on the wall here." So I have an office in the backyard.
I
So
love
it's
it. You got to show that
fitting
off for
nicely,
sure.
and it's
Yeah,
good in the
absolutely.
background. So
I think I already know the answer to this, but my last question is when you're not being a professor and helping the next generation of entrepreneurs or angel investing or being a CFO, what do you do for your downtime? What do you do to recharge? What's fun for you?
yeah, so I said I play golf, I play
I love
tennis, I
it.
ski, so want to
Yeah,
be outdoors, hike, and I mean, living in Northern California, we have all that at our disposal. So
I love it.
yeah,
Well, I'm
you
I'm
could
definitely picking up golf again this year. I used to play a
good.
little bit when I was in high school, and then I just kind of
Okay,
dropped it, got so busy. But I have been picking it back up this year. So
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
have
Well, if you're out here, would
yeah,
love to
next time
take
I'm
you
out,
out.
I'll call you.
Love to take you out to Half Moon Bay, where I play. It's gorgeous, right on the coast. We got 36 holes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spot.
I'll definitely want to hold you to that.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah. Okay.
amazing. Holy
Okay.
cow.
Great.
Yeah. Well, Steve, this was amazing. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me about your journey and your parenting style and your lessons learned.
A lot of fun, Young. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to having you talk to my students in a few weeks.
I can't wait. It's one of the most gratifying things ever. Thanks for having me, and thanks again for being on the show. We'll talk to you in a few weeks.